Kumusta? Ngayon ay may bago na naman tayong pag-aaralan at may bago na naman kayong matututunan dito sa Sir D Vlogs and Tutorials. Ang pag-aaralan natin ngayon ay ang significant figure. What is a significant figure? Significant figure is any of the digits of a number beginning with the digit farthest to the left that is not 0 and ending with the last digit farthest to the right that is either not 0 or that is a 0 but is considered to be exact. What does it mean? Later, we are going to discuss that definition by giving you the different guidelines on how to identify a significant figure. But before that, let me give you these digits. Can you identify how many significant figures are there? We have 3,300, 0.300, 30,300. How many significant figures are there? In 3,000, we have 1 significant figure, 4 sa 300, 3 sa 0.300, and 3 sa 30,300. Alam nyo ba kung bakit 1 lang ang significant figure ng 3,000, pero 4 sa 300? At ang 0.300 may tatlong significant figures na parehas lang din ng 30,300 na may 3 significant figures. Alam nyo ba kung bakit? Kung hindi, yan ang dapat ninyong matututunan ngayon. Kaya, stay tuned at makinig para maunawaan nyo kung paano mag-identify ng significant figures. Ibibigay ko sa inyo ngayon ang rules and guidelines. First rule, all non-zero digits are significant. Second, all leading zeros are not significant. Third, all captive zeros are significant. And 4, all terminal zeros are not significant. Isa-isahin natin ang mga rules at magbibigay ako ng mga halimbawa para mas lalo ninyong maintindihan kung ano ang ibig sabihin nito. Ready? Okay, simulan natin sa rule number 1. All non-zero digits are significant. Ibig sabihin, numbers from 1 to 9, dahil hindi sila mga 0, sila lahat ay significant. For example, we have 27,891,235. Since wala kayong nakikitang 0 sa digits na to, lahat sila ay non-zero, therefore, they are all significant. How many are there? Sige, let's count. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Therefore, we have 8 significant figures. Malinaw naman siguro ang rule number 1. Basta hindi 0 ang digit, considered silang lahat na significant. Proceed tayo sa rule number 2. We have all leading zeros are not significant. What does it mean? From the word itself na leading zeros, these are zeros in front of other significant digits or non-zero digits. Let's have an example. For example, we have 0.000123. How many significant figures are there in these digits? Apply muna natin ang rule number 1. Ano ulit ang rule number 1? All non-zero digits are significant. Bilangin nga natin kung ilang non-zero digits ang nandito. We have 1, 2, 3. By applying rule number 1, we're able to identify that we have 3 significant figures in these digits. Now let's apply rule number 2. Saan dito ang tinatawag nating leading zeros? Okay, these are now the leading zeros and are not significant. Dahil hindi siya significant digits, therefore, hindi natin siya isasama sa bilang. How many significant figures are there now? Using rule number 1, we're able to identify that we have 3. Therefore, ang significant figures natin ay 3. Okay? Let's proceed to our next example. We have 0.0056. How many significant figures are there in these digits? Again, we are going to apply first the first rule, which is all non-zero digits are significant. Can you identify now what are the non-zero digits are there? Okay, let's count. We have 5 and 6. Therefore, rule number 1, we have 2 significant figures. Now, let's apply rule number 2. Now, these are the leading zeros and they are not significant. Therefore, we have 2 significant figures in these digits. Last example, for rule number 2, we have 0.00001. How many significant figures are there? Can you identify now? If your answer is 1, then you are correct. How? Why 1? Okay, let's apply again rule number 1. Again, what is that rule? All non-zero digits are significant, and we only have 1. In rule number 2, we have this one as not significant, the leading zeros. Therefore, we only have 1 significant figures for these numbers. Now, let's proceed with rule number 3. We have all captive zeros are significant. Ano naman ang ibig sabihin ng captive zeros? Captive zeros, these are zeros in between 2 non-zero digits. Okay? Zeros na napapagitnaan ng dalawang hindi zero na digits. Those are captive zeros. Let's have some examples. We have 0.0000101. Now, how many significant figures are there? Okay? Balik ulit tayo sa rule number 1. Rule number 1, all non-zero digits are significant. How many non-zero digits do we have? Let's count. We have 1 and 2. Apply muna natin ang rule number 3 para mabilang natin kung ilan ang lahat ng significant figures. This 0 in between 1 and another 1 ang tinatawag natin na captive zero. Again, captive zeros are significant. Therefore, we have another 1 significant figure. Okay, now let's apply rule number 2. These are the leading zeros and are not significant. How many significant figures do we have now? We have 2 from rule number 1 and 1 from rule number 3. Therefore, we have 3 significant figures. Let's have another example. We have 901,007. Let's apply again rule number 1. All non-zero digits are significant. Let's count the non-zero digits. 1, 2, 3. Therefore, we have 3 significant figures from rule number 1. Can we apply rule number 2? Do we have leading zeros? We don't have. Therefore, hindi natin siya sasali. Now, let's go with rule number 3. Can you identify where are the captive zeros? Okay, these are the captive zeros. We have 1, 2, 3. So, plus 3 significant figures. All in all, how many significant figures do we have? 3 from rule number 1 plus 3 from rule number 3. Therefore, we have 6 significant figures. Very good. Next example, we have 0.050,020,03. Now let's identify how many significant figures are there. Okay, let's again apply rule number 1. All non-zero digits are significant. We have 1, 2, and 3. Therefore, we have 3 significant figures from rule number 1. Let's now apply rule number 2. All leading zeros are not significant. These are now the leading zeros and are not significant. And for rule number 3, captive zeros, these are now the captive zeros. How many are they? 1, 2, 3, 4. Therefore, we have 4 significant figures from rule number 3. All in all, how many significant figures do we have now? 3 plus 4, we have 7 significant figures. Now, punta naman tayo sa fourth rule. Terminal zeros are not significant. Ano naman ang ibig sabihin ng terminal zeros? Ito yung zeros sa dulo ng numbers. Terminal zeros are not significant only when the given numbers are whole numbers. For example, we have here 300,600,000. Let's apply first rule number 1. Again, rule number 1, all non-zero digits are significant. Saan dito ang non-zero digits? Ilan ang non-zero digits na given sa ating whole numbers? We have 3 and 6. Therefore, we have 2 significant figures from rule number 1. Rule number 2, leading zeros are not significant. Do we have leading zeros here? Of course, we don't have dahil ang given natin ay whole numbers. So, gagawin natin, cross out natin si rule number 2. Now, let's proceed with rule number 3. Captive zeros are significant. Do we have captive zeros? Where are they? Can you identify kung saan ang ating captive zeros? Again, captive zeros are zeros in between 2 non-zero digits. Therefore, we have here, this is now the captive zeros in between 3 and 6. Since these are captive zeros, these are now significant. Therefore, we have additional 2 significant figures from rule number 3. Now, let's apply rule number 4. Saan dito ang tinatawag natin na terminal zeros? Okay, these are now the terminal zeros. And according to rule number 4, terminal zeros are not significant. Therefore, hindi natin siya sasama sa bilang. How many significant figures do we have now? We have 2 from rule number 1 and 2 from rule number 3. All in all, we have 4 significant figures for these digits. Nakuha nyo na ba ang rule number 4? Let's have another example. We have here 100,000. Okay, let's apply rule number 1. Non-zero, we have 1. So therefore, we have 1 significant digit. And leading zeros that we have? We don't have leading zeros. And captive zeros that we have? We don't have also captive zeros. How about terminal zeros? Do we have? Okay, these are now the terminal zeros, and terminal zeros are not significant. Okay, so how many significant figures do we have now? In 100,000, we only have 1 significant figure from rule number 1. Very good. Nakuha nyo na ba? Madali lang, di ba? One more example for rule number 4. We have 567,100,000. Now let's apply rule number 1. Ilan dito ang non-zero? We have 5, 6, 7, and we also have 1. Therefore, we have 4 significant figures from rule number 1. Rule number 2. Do we have leading zeros? Of course, we don't have. Rule number 3. Do we have captive zeros? Of course, we do have. These are now the captive zeros and are significant. How many are they? 3. Okay, now let's apply rule number 4. Do we have captive zeros? Okay, these are now our captive zeros. And of course, they are not significant. Therefore, how many significant figures do we have now? 4 from rule number 1 and 3 from rule number 3. Therefore, we have how many? How many? We have 7 significant figures. Very good. May iba pa tayong rules and guidelines sa pag-identify ng significant figures para hindi tayo mamamali. Number 5. Zeros at the right of both last non-zero digits and decimal place are significant. 6. Base numbers in a scientific notation are significant. 7. A bar may be placed over the first zero after the last non-zero digit is also significant. Isa-isahin natin. Let's start with rule number 5. Zeros at the right of both last non-zero digit and decimal place are significant. These are terminal zeros after the non-zero digits or a decimal place. Kung sa rule number 4 sinasabi na terminal zeros are not significant, dito naman sa rule number 5, terminal zeros are significant if and only if the given is not in whole number but in decimal numbers. Ngayon balikan muna natin ang rule number 4 para makita natin ang difference. Okay, we have here the set of numbers. From rule number 1, we have 4 significant figures. From rule number 2, we don't have leading zeros. Rule number 3, do we have captive zeros? Yes, we do have. And those are, or we have 3. Okay, now, rule number 4, terminal zeros are not significant. Okay, we have there terminal zeros. So, all in all, we have 7 significant figures. Okay, let's apply now rule number 5. Rule number 5 says that zeros at the right of both last non-zero digit and a decimal place are significant. Kailan nagiging significant ang terminal zeros? Okay, we have here the set of numbers and observe nyo, meron na tayo ditong decimal point. Ito, okay? Now, because of this decimal point, our terminal zeros will become significant. Therefore, we have 2 significant figures from rule number 5. Kaya, ang 7 significant figures kanina ay madadagdagan ng 2. Kaya ito ay magiging, we have now 9 significant figures. Let's have another example. We have here 1000.00. Okay, let's apply now the rules. Rule number 1, non-zero digits, do we have? Okay, we have 1. Rule number 2, do we have leading zeros? Do we have? We don't have. Rule number 3, captive zeros, do we have? Now, these zeros in between a decimal point and a non-zero digit will become captive zeros. Therefore, we have 3. Next, rule number 4. Terminal zeros, do we have? Of course, we don't have terminal zeros now. These zeros will become significant because of this decimal point. Therefore, in rule number 5, we have now additional of 2 significant figures. All in all, we have how many significant figures now? We have 6 significant figures. 1 from rule 1, 3 from rule 3, and 2 from rule 5. Now let's go with rule number 6. Rule number 6, base numbers in a scientific notation are significant. For example, we have here 1.0 times 10 raised to 4. This 1.0 ang ating tinatawag na base numbers. Kung ilan ang nandyan, yan din yung ating significant figures. Therefore, we have 2 significant figures for this scientific notation. Next example, we have 9.0134 times 10 to 4. Ito ang ating base numbers. Kung ilan ang nandyan, yun ang ating significant figures. And we have 5 significant figures. Yun lang ang dapat yung tandaan sa rule number 6. Lahat ng base numbers, yun yung kanyang significant figures. Huwag nyo naintindihin ang times 10 raised niya. Hindi yun kasama. Base numbers only. Rule number 7. We have a bar may be placed over first zero after the last non-zero digit is also significant. Minsan, ang 0 ay nilalagyan ng bar sa taas. Pag may bar na ito sa taas, ibig sabihin counted na siya. Magiging significant figure na siya. Like for example, this one, you have there a bar on top of a 0 after 1. Dahil sa bar na to, magiging significant si 0. These zeros naman, dahil wala silang bar on top, they are not significant. Because from rule number 5, terminal zeros are not significant. How many significant figures do we have now? We have 2 significant figures, that 1 and 0 na may bar sa taas. Pwede rin ilagay ang bar below 0. Okay, like for example this one, makita nyo ang bar ay nasa ilalim ng 0, wala sa taas. Since meron dyang bar, ang 0 na yan ay magiging significant. Therefore, how many significant figures do we have now? We have 4 significant figures, that's 6, 1, 3, and 0 with a bar below. Okay, bisitahin ulit natin ang 7 rules. Rule 1, all non-zero digits are significant. 2, all leading zeros are not significant. 3, all captive zeros are significant. 4, all terminal zeros are not significant. 5, zeros at the right of both last non-zero digit and a decimal place are significant. 6, base numbers in a scientific notation are significant. 7, a bar may be placed over the first 0 after the last non-zero digit is also significant. Ngayong naipaliwanag ko na ang lahat, ngayon magkakaroon tayo ng practice time. Give the significant figures in the following digits. We have here 0.00896. How many significant figures are there? Can you guess? We have 3 significant figures, applying rule number 1 and rule number 2. Next example, we have 79,900. How many significant figures do we have here? We have also 3 significant figures, applying rule number 1 and rule number 4. Nakuha nyo ba? Very good. Next tayo, we have now 0.0001000. How many significant figures are there? Is it 1 or 4? The answer is 4. Applying rule number 1, rule number 2, and rule number 5. Last one, we have 692,100.00. How many significant figures are there? 6 or 8? The answer is we have 8 significant figures, applying rule number 1, rule number 3, and rule number 5. Nakuha mo ba? Very good. Now your turn. Give the significant figures in the following digits. You have 60 seconds to answer.
3, 2, 1.